Uh, I'm not going to say you've opened a can of worms, but I apologize in advance for my lengthy response to your question because I think it's a very important question, but uh, I think it's very complicated. So I think to try to be simple at the beginning, I'll tell you the truth, which is that organic certified producers in Hawaii have not increased in the last definitely 10 and I think more years. And the reason why has absolutely nothing to do with the interest or demand. It's because of the fact, in my opinion and experience, that there is essentially no support on the ground. And I'm not saying you're nobody. I'm not saying your program is doing nothing, but there is no support at the levels that farmers need to be becoming certified organic, because if you go back in history very slightly, you'll recognize that Hawaii Organic Farming Association was providing education, outreach, and certification. And when they stopped providing certification, what happened is that there wasn't really a connection with the demand for how to seek the support if you want to become certified organic, because they weren't that actively involved and didn't have their income source from being a certifying entity. And so they were no longer continuing to provide that. And I think that even though a certifying entity doesn't have to be located legally within the state where it's operating, Hawaii is so unique and different than anywhere else. Well, it's not true. Alaska is equivalent, but Alaska and Hawaii are so different than any of the other states, which have neighboring states where you can say, okay, well, we'll bring in a certifying entity from the next door state, which is physically adjacent. That's really different than when you're trying to provide information or work with farmers or consult with farmers, or farmers are seeking information and there's not really any outreach opportunity accessible to farmers. I'm not going to really say that there's no extension available on the topic of organics. However, at the easy, to make it to go more micro than you asked, because I want to expand back to the national level, but to make it more micro, I live in Kona. So in Kona, Hawaii, where the concentration of farms in the state of Hawaii, on the island of Hawaii and in the state of Hawaii happens to be located, there's no organic support whatsoever. The only way you can get any information about organics is I can contact your office and get tangential information, or I can talk to the inspector of organic certification who wants to sell their services because they're, making money from providing the answers the way they want, so it's biased information, but there's not any actual hands-on extension available information for, either through CTAR or through nonprofit organizations that could and should be providing that. And I think that CCOF, which operates in, I have it in my notes from a recent meeting, but something like 32 outreach offices around the country, actually around the world, is providing services to primarily to, they're based in California certified organic farmers, and that's fine. But you have to remember, economically and numerically, we're talking about such a massive number of farmers relative to Hawaii who have so much more money involved and are making so much more money, that what's offered on the ground anywhere in the state of California is very different than what you're going to find in Hawaii. Again, even if you recognize that in some parts of California is a very big state, you're going to much more easily access organic outreach information or support or extension than you are in other extremely remote areas. So, there are some similarities, but it's very different when you can call on a state entity and they will eventually provide services, whereas in Hawaii, there isn't really accessible. I'm not going to say information, but it's partly information and it's partly capacity and knowledge. And I think that Hawaii is standing on its own, but I think that we aren't at the state level really taking responsibility for making sure that the services that farmers who are interested in organics can access what they need in order to either do actions and or become certified organic. Whether it's they want to how to access a certain input or what they could use for a certain purpose that's organic. This information isn't readily available and it's not highly focused upon. And I think that in my personal experience with nonprofit organizations, many of the members will dismiss the demand for organic information because they want anyone who's interested in organic to go to some organic entity, whereas there is no such thing. So if you talk to a specific crop group about specific questions, they don't want to talk about it because it's like, that doesn't matter. That's just organic. Well, I will not correct that truth, but I'll comment on it. The fact that when coffee faced coffee berry borer beetle, and I took responsibility, this is over a decade now, I took responsibility and sought state government funding through the Department of Ag to help farmers with some of the new inputs that people were coming up with. 20% of the demand, and we had something like 220 participants in the funding that we did, 20% chose the organic option rather than the conventional option. And 20% of the coffee farmers are not certified organic. That it's more like 3% or 5%. And so what that taught me, and I made sure that was put in the report to the Department of Ag, is there's a lot more demand than is certified. And you should read from that and recognize that you, the Department of Ag, and any coffee organization should recognize that we need to make sure we're emphasizing that demand for organics because it is there. It's just that people don't have a way to turn it into access or reality because they don't know where to turn or where to get that unless you do something like what I did when I put that program together to make sure that the organic input is as accessible as the conventional input, because I didn't want to be creating biases by dismissing what could be said, oh, that's only a minority of the people, therefore we don't have to do it. Sure, 20% is still a minority. Even 5% is still a minority, but why would you dismiss minorities when you're coming up with programs or making priorities? It makes no sense to me because I come around to the much bigger picture than you even asked about at the national level. I come around to the truth of the whole, which is 100 years ago, how many farms in the world were organic? So since they were all organic and all organic experience is all agricultural experience is based on organic experience, whenever anybody argues that, oh, but you can't do that organic, oh, but that's not possible organic, oh, you wouldn't have these levels. Hawaii in the 1850s, when we started doing coffee, it was all done organically. So organic Kona coffee has more experience time-wise and production-wise than any other options. And I think that these short-term non-sustainable, both ecologically, but also from a continuous perspective, inputs that people use to try to deal with production levels or pest and disease control issues, they're basically irrelevant because they go away, they get replaced, they get changed, they get modified, and they keep a lot of people that are doing research to come up with the next ones and the next options, employed. But from a farmer perspective, my sense is, and it's related to organics generally, but we all should be working from the history of what has worked, and it's worked for at least 10,000 years. But I think, maybe not with coffee, but for a long time,
Forever.
thousands of years.
I mean, yeah. Like organic. That so interesting enough. The organic certification coming out of USDA is actually housed in their marketing department. I don't quite remember the exact name of the department, but it's primarily the marketing department of the USDA. Now, when it came to those 20% that you mentioned, dealing with the CRB, is that correct?
Yeah.
those folks want to produce their coffee organically, right? Now, what did you guys come up with? Because CRB was at the time considered um almost insurmountable. It was doing a lot of damage to the coffee industry here in Hawaii, and it seems like through various practices, and I can point to a few um the Hanai the Hanai. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, through the Hanai Eye. That they mentioned some, it doesn't say organic orchard management, but they talk about hygiene and when to clean and glean the berries and different things like that. Can you talk about how you guys went those 20, what you guys did, those 20%, what you guys did to deal with some of the pests when there wasn't that much information to pivot off of?